Yuno or Noel? Yuno or Noel? Alright, guess we gotta deal with them now. Yuno scaling isn't necessarily big or wacky, just sort of weird. I promise not to use too much of the same triad scaling as last time, don't worry, that will be for the Noel video, but since Yuno is the most detached from the light triad when it comes to fights, seeing as how he's from a different squad and all, he does have his own scaling that doesn't require any sort of referencing that has to be done as much as the others do. And unlike the entirety of the Black Clover community after that chapter, this will not be referencing to Yuno as a clown the entire time, so spoilers up to chapter 325 since there is scaling there that I do want to go over, and let's waste no time in rolling that intro. Yuno's scaling is weird not because he has some insane hacks or is heavily inconsistent, but just because of his narrative of being relative to Asta at nearly all points in the series. This should, hypothetically, make him easier to scale, since we did scale Asta prior, but when you realize that anti-magic and wind magic / spirit magic / star magic are two significantly different things, it starts to get a bit tricky, with things like Asta passively negating Kid's Playground just by using Devil Union and being able to cut off Lucifero's horn even though Yuno couldn't cut him with a direct attack to his back. Not only that, but Zenon even believed that Yuno was to be considered one of the strongest mages of the Clover Kingdom since he said that the kingdom's strongest forces were at the castle, to which Yuno replied that Asta would be able to deal with it when it came down to it, which only gives more to that Yuno is relative to Asta argument. Though this isn't saying that he's hard to scale at all, it's just convenient yet inconvenient at the same time, if you get what I mean. But enough excuses. Yuno's battle with Zenon is where the main bulk of Yuno's feats come up, since he does fight against Zenon at 3 different stages, being 55%, 100%, and post-Devil's Bargain. At 55%, Yuno is quite literally able to manhandle Zenon with just casually releasing Boreas under Zenon's spatial domination with a love tap to the chest. Not only was this ultra casually under a spatial magic spell where mages can't use magic unless under specific prerequisites, but Zenon even had a thought that Yuno, after just releasing Boreas, could have just been using even greater power to beat it, and even amped up to 70% just to get Ooga Booga'd by Yuno yet again, without a single scratch on him. This is somewhat impressive considering that previously, a Zenon fighting against a post-time skip Yuno was able to kidnap Vangeance and could take attacks from Zephyr, an attack that eroded anything that it cut just for the bone magic to regenerate faster than Zephyr could erode it, and no diff them at 55% for the glory of the Spade Kingdom. As we know, even 1% of devil power is considered a phenomenal increase, and Yuno only gets pushed once the first gate of Qliphoth opens and Zenon gets access to 100%. However, even at 100%, Yuno is able to shoot straight through Zenon with Yurios, and Zenon notes that he didn't even think that it was possible to be run through at 100%, and even stated that if Yuno had just aimed for his heart, he would have just straight won. After being put into an unwinnable situation, Zenon makes a Devil's Bargain with Beelzebub, making him able to press Yuno without issue and is able to tank an attack from Langris's spatial magic with the Devil's Heart, with Yuno even noting that Zenon's power now feels strangely similar to Zagrit's. Post Devil's Bargain, Yuno, after obtaining star magic, is able to tag Zenon multiple times with his stars, and is eventually able to cut him through his heart with Saint Sword of Zephyr. Even before these, Yuno's spirit dive was already kinda cracked, seeing as how a post-time skip Yuno, before even meeting Zenon, had been able to cut down Godoroys with Spirit of Zephyr, which doesn't seem like much on its own, but when you realize that Dark Disciples like Sevkin at 50% could tank attacks from Maluk who had trained at the Heart Kingdom for 6 months, things start to look a tad more impressive. Not a lot, but just a tad. And as we know from the Noel vs Vonica fight, devil percentage increases are not just linear increases, as each individual percent gives a phenomenal increase. So to think that Yuno and Boreas could just outright bully Zenon from 55 to 70% prior to any other amps, then only needing Yurios once Zenon got to 100% should probably say something. Even later on, Yuno was able to blast away an entire half of the Lucifero worm that Asta had cut up with Yurios, and was at the very least comparable to the captains like Mereoleona, who had taken out one of the 2 ancient demons released by the Triad with Hellfire Incarnate, one of which threatening to destroy the entire Clover Kingdom before Asta cut it down, making them at least somewhat relative, and was also on par with her while fighting against Lucy. Speed isn't delved too much into when it comes to Black Clover, since there aren't really that many speed feats that have real definitive numbers to them. However, it isn't like Yuno has no speed feats at all. Just like his strength feats, his main speed feats come from fighting the Triad and Lucy, with Yuno being able to blitz Zenon at 55% with Boreas and hitting with Yurios at 100%, as well as keeping up with an amped Devil's Bargain Zenon once he got Star Magic, to keeping up with and fighting beside Mario and reacting to Lucy's attacks, as well as Asta, Yami, and Noct against a stronger and faster Lucy. Though we can make it really easy, and we are making it really easy, and just say that Yuno is pretty much always going to be relative to Asta at all points in the series. This is not only implied by the two growing beside each other throughout the series, but if you really want feats, Yuno fighting Zenon and tagging him was a big deal, since Supreme Devils are stated to be stronger, as well as implied to be faster than Triad members at 100%, and Yuno was just able to blatantly keep up with a Zenon that had gotten amped to make him at least relative to that of a Supreme Devil. If you need something any more definitive, if you do, then who the f are you? Yuno directly says that while fighting beside Double Union Asta, that he can't follow Asta only because the anti-magic around him would destroy the star magic that's helping them evade attacks. So I wouldn't really know exactly how to make it any clearer for you. And while they are relative and it is really debatable which of the two is actually faster, just note that Yuno should always be within the same realm of speed as Asta. So whatever calcs you would have for Asta, Yuno would be within the exact same tier. And anyone who says otherwise is dumb and stinky. Not only that, but Yuno and Asta were also somewhat comparable to a fully awake Licht and Lumiere that were speed blitzing Zagrid, who said that they were moving so fast that he couldn't cast any Word Soul magic, and they were both able to tag and amp Zagrid in that same fight, and reacted to Patri, who has always been defined as light speed by basically every source in the entire series. So I can't really make it any simpler for you aside from the fact that he should be around Asta's level and speed, if not slightly faster, since there have been multiple instances where Asta has had to follow him with his anti-magic tracking and using that to increase his speed rather than just straight following him. Yuno has a decent amount of hacks, but the main bulk of those hacks comes from the Grinberry All Special Star Magic. With Star Magic, Yuno can teleport between the stars, fire beams of light from them, create a whip, make defensive walls, make new stars. He has the whole shebang going on with them. Not only do the stars give him all of this, but they also have their own little mana zone around each of them. Something that we can see when Seke can move while Mimosa is healing Asta under a star under Lucifero's gravity magic, and can even teleport others alongside himself, such as when he was fighting alongside Marilliona and saving Yami from Lucy after his arm was broken. Even without the star magic, Yuno has spirit magic, which gives him access to not only spirit dive, a many times multiplier that also gives him the ability to be loved by mana, but also Saint Stage, the ability to kill devils whose hearts are durable enough to tank attacks from Langris's offensive spatial magic, which is a magic that negated durability and utterly erased anything it touched aside from other spatial magic. In Spirit Dive, Yuno also gets multiple different weapons with their own unique hacks. The first being Spirit of Zephyr, being a sword that erodes anything it cuts, being able to cut through Zenon with Saint Sword and the Otherworld magic from Zagrid. Boreas is just a big caliber that's just a big burst in power, though it does seem to crank up the being loved by mana aspect up to 11, such as when Yuno erases all of Zenon's bone magic around them before folding him with one shot from Boreas. As for Yurios, it's a condensed bow and arrow that's just insanely fast and powerful, being shown when Yuno blasted a 100% Zenon, who even said that Yurios was too fast, and stated that if Yuno had hit him in his heart prior to the Devil's Bargain, he would have just blatantly killed him. Not only that, but it could blast apart one half of the giant Lucifero worm that was falling on the entire Spade village. As for the people thinking me saying that being loved by mana is fake as hell, being loved by mana actually has influence in the series, allowing him to erase and use mana around him even without mana zone, like against the grid after getting an amp to a spirit dive, and when he fights against Zenon is able to use mana under Zenon's spatial domination, where only spatial mages who have perfected mana zone and people with as much mana as he does are able to use mana. He also, just like most other characters in the series, have this ability to push past their limits, like I mentioned in the Asta video, like when he goes from struggling against fighting Lick to fighting against the grid with 2 amps in the same night, or fighting against Zenon after 2 amps and being able to keep up with him with his own respective amps through Yurios, Star Magic, and Saint Sage. As for any sort of numbers involving Spirit Dive is stated in the guidebooks to be a many times multiplier, so it's really ambiguous as to how much stronger Spirit Dive does make Yuno. But just like everything else involving Yuno scaling, any number you do give to Asta, you could also just give to Yuno, so anywhere from around 3 times upwards to 10 times depending on who you ask, but it's safer to just make it at 3 times just to not cause any contention. Alright, we're done with boring Yuno, he's out of the way. Now we get to go into the last member, and arguably the member I'm most hyped to make a video on, being Noelle. I swear, just let me get through this Black Clover phase and this group of videos done so I can actually make something cool, like maybe VTuber power scaling or some dumb like that. Anyways, that's all for now. Nothing really cool or funny for an outro, so Yeah, just look out for the Noel video when it drops, like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, or don't, I can't force you to, and ciao.
俺たち金色の夜明け団クローバー王国最強の魔法騎士団だ。